welcome to Political Aficionado. I'm your host, Ahsan Safarnajad, and today we are going to talk about the recent episode and development between Iran and United States, particularly Trump threatening Iran and then Iran responding, the whole spat between social media figures uh, about Iran and whether Iran should have nuclear weapon, whether Iran can have nuclear weapon. We are going. I am going to give my own 2 cents about the whole issue, and then I'm going to also make a commentary, a brief one. I'll try to keep it brief about the spat, the arguments between social media figures, and I'm going to basically also speak about the future, which is very hard, as you guys know. I struggled a little bit about, whether or not I should make this video. At the end, I just decided that now that things have calmed down a little bit, but the issue has not been forgotten. It hasn't gone into obscurity. Now is the appropriate time in order to record this video. First, let's have a quick overview of what actually happened. On March 7th, Trump gave an interview to Fox Business on which he stated that he has sent a letter to Iran, that the Iranians can either resolve what the West considers, Iran's progression towards developing nuclear weapon. They can either solve that issue, diplomatically by negotiation, or they can choose military confrontation. One way or another, this so-called issue is going to be resolved. Then he proceeded, I think it was on March 17th, he proceeded to post a tweet on Truth Social, explaining and claiming that Iran is the main force behind the Ansar Allah movement in Yemen, and how he holds the Iranians responsible for every missile that is fired, every drone that is fired from Yemen. On that post on Truth Social, he mentioned the Iranian leader. It was interpreted as being very ominous and, not really showing good faith. Basically, this was considered that U.S. president is threatening with the assassination of the Iranian leadership, which again created a whole lot of, arguments inside Iran about whether Iran should move even further towards developing nuke or not. And so basically this was the American side putting pressure. The first statement that came out of Iran was that we deny receiving such letter. And in fact, from the data and info that we later on received, we found out that the letter was written, but it wasn't sent at the time of Trump making his statements. Well, long story short, the letter was eventually sent by the senior advisor of the UAE Caliph to Iran. It wasn't sent by the UAE's foreign minister, probably because the Emiratis, they knew that this is not a good letter. This has extraneous demands in it, and they weren't really hopeful that their so-called mediation is going to work. That's why they didn't bother the uh, the foreign minister of UAE, Mr. Abdullah bin Zayed, and the letter was actually sent to Iran by Mr. Uh, Anwar Muhammad Qarqash, right? So even the Emiratis weren't hopeful and weren't optimistic about what is going to happen. The Iranians read the letter. The Iranian Speaker of the Parliament, the Iranian Foreign Minister, numerous Iranian officials talked about the content of the letter, and somebody actually published the content of the letter, I mean, provisions of it. And it suffices to say that the Iranians, our part, Iran, didn't really like the content of that letter, despite the fact that it was trying to sort of maintain some sort of diplomatic relation. It tried to, leave the door open for diplomacy, but the demands of the U.S. president were simply unacceptable by the Iranian government. The letter contains things that are very similar to United States President executive order on imposing maximum pressure sanctions on Iran, which basically means that it's not just about restricting the Iranian nuclear activities, as the official narrative that comes out of the White House is. It's about restricting the Iranian missile program. It's about restricting the Iranian conventional capabilities. It's about an end to the support of the resistance groups by Iran. Basically fighting the Iranian asymmetrical capabilities, and also, they apparently demanded the dismantlement of PMF. So again, this didn't sit well with the Iranian political brass, and in the letter that later on we sent to the United States through the mediation of Oman, and that's not to digress, but it is important to note that Iranians chose the Sultanate of Oman rather than UAE as the mediator, basically showing that even from before the start of the negotiation, Iran is not going to make concessions easily. But the content of the letter was actually rather disappointing if you are an Iranian patriot, or if you think that the Iranian government should develop nuclear weapon. The content was basically saying we are not going to negotiate on our conventional capabilities, on our missile technology. We're not going to restrict that program. We are not going to stop helping the resistance groups within the axis of resistance. The way that they phrased it was that they have autonomy, and they are responsible for their own actions. If you want to talk to Houthis, you want the Houthis to stop. Apologies for using the term Houthis. If you want the Ansarullah to stop attacking Israel, well, negotiate with them. We have little control over them, and they are responsible for making their own decisions. So no negotiation on missile program, that's a red line. No negotiation on the resistance groups, the Iranian so-called asymmetrical capabilities, if you're into that line of rhetoric. But we are going to negotiate on nuclear program. And unfortunately, it seems from the rhetoric and the kind of general census amongst the Iranian politicians, it seems that they are willing to accept even more restrictions than those in JCPOA. So a little bit of bad news for those who are pro-resistance and think that Iran should develop nuclear weapon. So that happened, and basically the Iranian response was sent. Now, I think that there is benefit to discuss a little bit the events of Syria rather than directly jumping into discussing the situation that Iran is facing today. I think that it is very beneficial to talk about Syria, and let me first describe what happened in Syria. I mean, something that was neglected by many analysts, and then it might become clear as to why I think that this is very prevalent to discuss what happened in Syria to the current way that people are taking in the information about the current dynamic between Iran and the United States. Well, on December 25th of 2023, the Iranian general of Quds Force, IRGC Quds Force, Mr. Sayyid Razi Mousavi, was assassinated by the Israeli regime. Now, this person was probably the most influential Iranian military commander that was operating inside Syria. He was the head of the IRGC Quds Force logistic program in Syria and Lebanon. Very, very important figure. A while after that, General Zahedi was assassinated. I think that he was assassinated in April 2024, which brought the Iranian response, in the form of Operation True Promise 1. General Zahedi was, first of all, he was assassinated inside the Iranian embassy in Syria, which shows total disregard for international law by the Israeli regime, by the United States and the European regime. And the reason that I'm mentioning this, because later on we are going to talk about the individuals who are talking about the international law non-stop, and they are skewing things in different ways in order to reach their own conclusion. So just please keep that in mind, that it was an unbelievable escalation by the Western Front against the axis of resistance. General Zahedi was the commander of IRGC Quds Force operation in Syria and Lebanon from the late 2000 to 2016, 17 probably, and even recently he had played a major role in Syria. I think that he again took the responsibility of commanding the fronts in Syria and Lebanon. These two major figures were assassinated by Israel. And prior to that, in 2020, General Soleimani, the commander of IRGC Quds Force, the head of the IRGC Quds Force, was also assassinated by the US President Donald J. Trump. After all and each of these incidents, you were hearing the analysts, and to a certain degree, I'm also guilty of doing this thing that I'm about to criticize. But during and after each and every one of these incidents, the analysts were going and saying, well, not just the analysts, the main narrative that was coming out of Tehran, that the axis of resistance in general against the imperialist forces inside the region, it is not reliant on single individuals to further its cause, right? We are not dependent on the individuals. We are going to move forward, and we are going to do, what is necessary, right? This is not going to stop us or even impede our ability to fight back against this aggressive force that is trying to colonize Palestine. But fast forward to recent months, and we have seen the collapse of the Syrian government. The Syrian government's collapse came due to multiple reasons. So what I'm about to say is not going to be the sole reason behind why the Syrian government collapsed and Al-Qaeda took control of Syria, but it contributed to a great extent. You had the head of the IRGC Quds Force, the head of the IRGC logistics in Syria and Lebanon, the head of the operation in Syria and Lebanon. You had all three of them assassinated. Don't you think that it had a major role, major importance in Syria being lost and collapsing in the way that it did, less than 2 weeks? I would say that, the assassination of these three figures, and most important out of these three figures was the logistic commander, Sayyid Razi Mousavi. I would argue that it had a major role. It was a major factor in what happened in Syria. And the reason that I'm bringing this up, and sorry for my scattered thoughts, the reason that I'm bringing this up is that I think that there needs to be responsibility. Not just responsibility, there needs to be accountability. We are just brushing these losses under the carpet as if they don't mean anything. But they do. And again, what I mentioned was a very clear example of why it matters, why these losses matter, and why we need to talk about it to maintain some sort of relation with the reality. And this brings us to the next segment, on analyzing the current situation and as to why I think that the current approach that many pro-resistance accounts online and in real life, their approach is not really healthy. We saw what happened. If you want to continue to go down this trajectory, by all means, you're welcome. But I think that, it's not really healthy to keep denying, the reality every time that the axis of resistance loses. And maybe there needs to be a change in the protocol and in the framework by which the IRGC, the resistance in general, conducts its business. Currently Hezbollah has went into some sort of defensive mode, and it is not fighting Israel in the way that it once did. But it's actually in my opinion, a rather brilliant strategy, because it seems that they're trying to understand their weaknesses, their strength, and they're trying to adapt to the new reality, which is that their entire level of decision makers inside Hezbollah was assassinated. Well, there are different ways that you can look at, the development between Iran and the United States and the current situation that we are currently in. But the most obvious one, the most enticing for many people, is the military aspect of it, which brings us to this news of 7 B-2 bombers being deployed to Diego Garcia Island. Numerous C-17 flights to Diego Garcia, or fuel tankers, the KC-135. K stands for tanker, C stands for cargo. The fuel tankers being deployed there. Ohio class ballistic missile submarine being uh, dispatched to the Indian Ocean, and actually that was uh, sort of the NIRGC commander warned about this being a major escalation by the United States government. And we also have a US that has adopted a new nuclear posture that would allow it. I mean, it wasn't actually new. They adopted that posture in 2018, right? So it's not new, but they now can use low yield nuclear bombs against target facilities inside Iran. And actually, I think that Scott Ritter has a very good video about analyzing the military aspects of it. If you can sit through all the other stuff that is in that video, go and watch episode 250 of the Ask the Inspector. I think that it is rather a good source of information to take in the things. I'm not going to really talk about the military aspect of the events between Iran and the United States, because there are multiple videos by different individuals as to why attacking Iran is not a good idea. Tucker Carlson has an entire compilation on his YouTube channel about that. I've talked about it on multiple occasions on different platforms, so I don't think that it is really needed to talk about that aspect more specifically, because the pro-resistance branch or fraction or whatever, they're already the big chunk of my viewers, and they already subscribe to this notion of Iran being really, really strong. Since the majority of my audience are made up of those guys, I don't really see any value to talk about why Iran is powerful. I will talk about it later on at the end of the video when I'm going to talk about the future of the region. But for now, I want to focus on comments like this. So there was a news being published by Press TV. Underneath that tweet, I went on and made a comment. Except if they drop 6-7 nukes on Iran. While it is still, maybe I'm still naive to think that after everything that Israel has done to the Palestinians, maybe the world would not tolerate 6 or 7 nukes on Iran. Maybe I am still believing that deep down. Not deep down, somewhere. I want to believe that the world would not stand idly by as the United States would carry out unbelievable destruction on Iran. But to a certain degree, I'm also not really optimistic. The different kind of atrocities that Israelis have carried out on the Palestinian population. To talk about diversity, there is no end to their creativity in the ways that they have harassed, they have abused, murdered, tortured the Palestinian population. So why would I be really optimistic about the situation? I think that when we are in this circumstance, it is more acceptable, in my opinion at least, to be pessimist rather than an optimist, because you are safer. It's better to be safe than sorry, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, we had like an individual that responded, well, people overestimate the power of nukes. I think that's the first red flag. This is the first red flag that we've seen, constantly dismissing everything that comes out of United States. And look where it has brought us. Do you really want to continue down this trajectory? Just continuously dismissing things. Oh no, it's not really that important that Sayyid Razi Musavi was assassinated. Ismail Haniyeh, Yahya Sinwar, Sayyid Hashim Safiuddin, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, General Zahiri, General Abbas Nil Furushan. Is there any point in time that you will stop and say, well, we have to be worried. We have to take things seriously. I mean, this is really, really, really pissing me off, because just this constant denial of everything, absolutely everything. Do we have the human capital? Do we have the economic capital even to go through what the United States is saying? So these things should not be dismissed this nonchalantly. The person said that, oh, V2s are old as hell, they are the relics of the past, and he mentioned something about the destructive power of nukes. I said that obviously you can read this. B2 is a serious thing. It's a serious stealth bomb, which is said that it's a 1960 technology. I mean, it first came out in the 80s, so not really true. But this is the second part. The F-170 was shot down. It has lower RCS. RCS stands for radar cross section, and it was shot down by Serbs in the Yugoslavia war and everything. What this person doesn't mention is the fact that the F-117 was shot down when it came within the 23-kilometer range of that SAM system. So I don't really think that it is, something to brag about, because the stealth technology doesn't mean that you are completely invisible to the radar systems. No, it just means that you are less likely to be found and discovered by the radar systems. And talking about this, I mean, it's good to have opinions on different things and talk about different things and read articles, read about military weaponry, but to a certain extent you also have to understand your limited knowledge. And just because you know that F-117 was shot down, it is not necessarily indicative of the fact that you are now a full-fledged military analyst. Just a level of humility and humbleness, if that's even a word, would be appreciated. Especially after everything that we went through, I think that we are in no position to be really dismissive of all of these events that are taking place. I would say that, pessimism is actually working better than optimism right now. I'm sorry for repeating myself, but this is the main issue that I have. But now let's go and talk about different aspects of it, because there are other things that we can talk about with regards to the approach that the United States has adopted on Iran, and I think that maybe economy would be a good way to start. Let me adjust the video. Okay, right. Okay, so this is an article from United Against Nuclear Iran. So let's see what this article says. Okay. As you can see, it says, the United Against Nuclear Iran has identified 70 foreign vessels suspected of involving the illicit transfer of Iranian crude oil, and it continues and say from November 2020 that we did that thing. Now the number has actually risen to 510. And then he also explains how these the shadow fleet of Iran works. Very simplistically, there are other methods that they utilize in order to sell the Iranian oil. But yeah, and now in this section it says 90% of this Iranian oil is being moved by the ships that have the flag of Panama. And as you can see here with the graph, you can see how much of the Iranian oil is being transferred by the Panama. So why is this relevant? Well, this is relevant because of this. Panama revokes 128 ships registered in crackdown on Russia and Iran's shadow fleet. Well, you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Panama has started to basically abiding by the threats of United States. So, in future, Iran might not have as easy of a time as it used to have in selling its oil. You can see here that the sanctions, the compliance with the sanction has already started. 128 ships are already, the registration of 128 ships have already been revoked by Panama. So this is very major issue. This is not something that you can dismiss easily. They are trying to strangle the Iranian oil, and if you do not sell your oil on the global market, then how are you supposed to basically have the income necessary in order to keep a war going, to defend your country? There is a reason as to why the Russian defense minister is an economist. If you go through his graduation, if you read about him and the universities that he actually went, you'll see that most of his education, not most of, he went to the Moscow University on he studied economy at Moscow State University. Then he went and wrote a thesis about money circulation, if I remember correctly. And at every level that you look at his work, he was mostly preoccupied and concentrated on economy. So why is he now the defense minister of Russia? Because keeping a war going is very resource consuming. And this brings us to another reason as to why again, we do not have the luxury of just constantly dismissing the threats that are coming out of United States. Let me Google something. Okay, so the former politician inside the Rouhani administration stated that a portion of the Iranian sort of shadowy banking system was revealed to the hostile uh, forces inside the region by the Iranian government itself. Right? Let's see this. Sayyid Muhammad, apologies, not Muhammad, Sayyid Mohsen Ghamsari, the former head of the International Department of National Iranian Oil Company. I mean, this news is rather old. It's 6 years old. So it says that last week talked about bypassing the sanctions on oil. And he said that we had a sort of shadowy banking system, and we unveiled it under FIU to the foreigners. And this helped the United States and the EU coalition in order to exert pressure on us. This is an individual that was holding an office during the Rouhani administration, saying that this thing has happened. So to what extent can we be now doubtful, or think about the possibility of the same thing happening with regards to Iranian oil tankers? If you look at the number of the sanctions that were imposed on the Iranian oil tankers, the Iranian entities involved in oil trade, and the firms that are doing this, you'll see that there has been a rapid acceleration in the amount of entities that have been sanctioned. Oil tankers, firms, individuals, name it. It has increased. I'm going to try to edit the stats so that they would appear somewhere in the screen. But there has been a rapid increase in the amount of people that have been sanctioned. So, and I'm thinking out loud, is there a possibility that the oil network, the network of Iranian selling oil, the so-called shadow fleet, is being on purpose uncovered to, the data on them being given to the United States, to Europeans on purpose, so that the entire thing collapses. We're talking about fifth column here. And again, based on the fact that we already experienced similar thing with regards to Iranian sort of shadowy banking system, shadow banks, if you want to call it that, we already experienced that. So who's to say that this is in some ways it is a conspiracy theory, because I do not have data on that. All I have is the fact that the number has increased rapidly. It has accelerated. And no, this is, by the way, for those of you who are thinking that, okay, the orange man is putting more pressure on Iran than Joe Biden. No, it's not about Joe Biden or Donald Trump. It's actually about Raisi administration versus Pezeshkian administration. And this might upset people, but the data is there. And also we have history, we have precedent of the banking system being purposefully sort of leaked to the Americans so that they would sanction the Iranian banking system and suffocate the Iranian economy. So that's the economy aspect of the things. Let's see if we can talk about other things. I have prepared notes prior to this, so okay, let's talk about the political front. Right, here's what's happening. The IAEA Board of Governors is going to pretty soon have a session, a meeting about the Iranian nuclear program. And they are most likely going to talk about the fact that Iran is not abiding by some of its commitments within the framework of JCPOA, which is clear because the United States has withdrawn from the deal unilaterally. So why should Iran be the only country that is abiding by its commitment within the framework of JCPOA? The Europeans are not doing that either, by the way. They're not abiding by their commitments. So this is the hypocrisy of the West, demanding that Iran would be the sole party that would abide by its commitments within the framework of JCPOA. But there's more to this. EU has basically given Iran the same ultimatum that Donald Trump gave Iran. Donald Trump said, negotiate or else we are going to do bad things to you. And you have only 2 months in order to make up your mind. Well, the Europeans also said the same thing. So they gave Iran a 2 months ultimatum. I mean, this was this was 3 weeks ago. So I think that we're only 1 month and a half away from the ultimatum, that the deadline of the ultimatum given by the EU to Iran. And what they threatened Iran was that they are going to activate the snapback mechanism. What is the snapback mechanism, you might ask? Well, basically it states that if the parties within JCPOA, the participatory, the states within the JCPOA, if they think that a party is non-compliant to the deal itself, they have the option of reimposing the sanctions on Iran by activating this mechanism and putting this question whether the entire collective is in favor of issuing a new resolution on continual of the removal of the sanctions on Iran. So they threatened Iran with that. And by the way, for those of you who are thinking that Russia and China are going to veto this, they are not going to do that. Not because they are not interested in doing so, no, but because the mechanism has been defined in such a way that it is impossible for anyone to veto it. So it's not a matter of not wanting to, it's a matter of not being able to do so, right? And just think about this. Think about the roadmap that is in front of us. IAEA's Board of Governors is going to basically have a meeting about Iranian nuclear program. It is almost clear as the day what they are going to say about Iranian nuclear program. We know that. They're going to say that Iran is not compliant. Iran probably has a military dimension in its nuclear program, all sorts of things. Then the Europeans would probably activate the snapback mechanism, which Russia and China can't really veto. So all these sanctions on Iran will be reimposed. And the difference between these sanctions and the other sanctions that Iran is currently in, or other countries, is that these sanctions are issued by United Nations Security Council, which means that legally, in terms of the international law, they are binding, they're legally binding. One of the differences between Iran and Russia, and why the Russian economy was so resilient towards the sanctions, not only not going into a recession or even collapsing, but also even thriving to some extent uh, after the sanctions being imposed on Russia, is due to the fact that the sanctions that are imposed on Russia are unilateral, and the sanctions which were imposed on Iran, they were not unilateral. They were United Nations Security Council resolutions. Resolution 1929, Resolution 1830, 8 or 5, Resolution 1703. I'm going to list them on the screen somewhere. I don't remember the exact number of each resolution, but there were 6 resolutions in total that imposed sanctions on Iran. The most recent one, Resolution 1929, brings Iran under the Chapter 7, Article 41 of Chapter 7 of United Nations Charter, which is a step before Article 42. Article 42 is allowing the countries to search the Iranian ships, the Iranian cargo, in order to make sure that no arms are being transferred by the Iranian tankers, the Iranian cargo ships, which I would say that it is not really unlikely for United States and Europe in order to pursue that objective, due to the fact that they hold Iran responsible for the transfer of weapons to the groups within the axis of resistance. So I'm saying that is going to be used as a justification. Obviously, we know that there is a blockade on Yemen, so it doesn't entirely work the way that people like to make it sound. But again, it's going to be used as an excuse in order to justify searching the Iranian ships. And I don't know if you know about the process of investigating a ship. It's going to take a few months, so that will create instability in terms of supply chain within the Iranian economy. And considering the inflation that we have, it will actually be very serious. So let's look at a tweet here. Okay, so why am I so concerned about the Iranian economy, and why I think that it goes hand in hand with the plan that United States has for Iran? As you can see on the screen, unfortunately, we have less than good news about the Iranian economy. The value of the Iranian currency, Iranian rial, is going to be soon halved of what it was under the Raisi administration. It went from 53, 56 thousand tuman in exchange for a single dollar, to now dollar being equivalent to the value of 105,000 Iranian tuman. And as you can see, this is not really promising, right? So on the economic front, considering everything that we talked about, considering the fact that United States and the Europeans have a clear roadmap as to what to do, what kind of pressure they need to exert on the Iranian government in order to reach out to the conclusion that they want, you'll see that it is very hard for us to basically deny the current situation that Iran is dealing with, which is not really good. So, considering the military aspect of it, the economic aspect of it, the political aspect of it, which in turn is going to enable United States and Europeans to further pressure Iran in terms of suffocating it economically speaking, right? So even the political aspect contributes to both military aggression towards Iran and the economic aggression towards Iran. Considering this, I think that we have reasons to think that this current situation should be taken very seriously. And unfortunately, it is not. The Iranian vice president in parliamentary affairs traveled to Argentina very, very recently during the Iranian New Year, which we call Nowruz. He went to Argentina. Now, this is wrong on so many levels. One aspect of it is due to the fact that Argentina holds Iran responsible for, the attack on the Israeli embassy on its soil. It was actually an attack carried out, if I remember correctly, during the 90s, I think 1999, by a group called, it's been a while since I talked about this, I think Islamic Jihad Organization or something, which in turn has had affiliation with Hezbollah, which in turn has relations with Iran. So kind of a finicky and very loose relation there. They're stretching the truth a little bit in order to find some reason to blame Iran. But regardless, they are doing that. And if I remember again correctly, there are certain individuals that are wanted from the Iranian government in Argentina. Setting aside all of this, which shows, why would you go to Argentina? It doesn't make any sense. But we are talking about wartime, a semi-wartime situation inside Iran. And I don't understand for the life of me why anyone would think that it is a good idea to travel to Argentina in such a sensitive time, which actually portrays you the bigger picture that we are here and we're talking about. The fact that, unfortunately, I don't think that there is the sensitivity needed and the understanding that is needed for the Iranian politicians, what kind of situation that they are dealing with, right? So, these things are very, very alarming. I don't think that it is okay for individuals to do these kind of things at this current juncture. Well, if you have made it to this part of the video, now we are going to talk about the recent spat on social media about what actually happened between social media influencers, more specifically about Mr. Scott Ritter and other individuals. So let's first play this video of Mr. Ritter talking about his opinion on Iran and its nuclear weapon, nuclear program, not nuclear weapon.
Is the cornerstone of strategic, abilities. I know Iran keeps saying they have no desire to have a nuke, but they don't keep saying that. That's the problem. You see, their strategic leadership says, "Oh, we did a fatwa, and we don't want a nuclear weapon." Okay, then be consistent. Why then do they allow a former foreign minister who is on senior advisory committees to come out and say, no, Iran has crossed all of the technical thresholds needed to build a nuclear weapon. We just await the political decision. Why do they allow the Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders who are responsible for the nuclear program to come out and say the same thing? We have mastered the technology, and within 1 week, we could put a weapon together that can be delivered. I'm not making this up. Official after official after official last year were committing to this. Why did the Iranian parliament, which is the government, by the way, come together in one of their committees and appeal to the supreme leader to reverse the fatwa? And why did the advisors to the supreme leader come up with the mechanism to reverse the fatwa? To say, if a situation in the world arises where something new, unforeseen, represents an existential threat to the existence of the Islamic Republic, then the fatwa could be reversed and we could reconsider it. And person after person after person kept saying that Israel's continued.
So at this time, I would want you to notice how long he went on a tangent to say person after person after person, politician after politician, political figures, individuals stated that Iran might go through the process of developing nuclear weapon precisely due to what he's going to say now.
Threat and America threatening to attack represents the very trigger that should lead to the fatwa being reversed. I'm not making all this up. So now, if you're an American policymaker, again, not Scott Ritter on the digital mob echo chamber. If all I existed to do is get digital, has every right to have a nuclear weapon. If Saddam would still be here today, and those North Koreans, oh look, it's just echoing, meaningless, because nobody who matters cares about that line of thinking, including Iran. What I've been trying to tell people is stop trying to be more Iranian than the Iranians.
Okay. Did you witness what just happened? I don't know if you witnessed or not. He went on a rather big rant about how many politicians in Iran have stated that Iran might go nuclear, but now he's trying to gaslight you and say that, oh, you're not Iranian and you do not have the legitimacy to talk about whether Iran should develop nuclear weapon or not. And this kind of inconsistencies are very, very clear and dime a dozen in his video, episode 250, when he talks about the Iranian nuclear weapon. I mean, the possibility of Iran developing nuclear weapon and the entire thing between Iran and the United States. During the entire episode, you will find inconsistencies like this a lot, and I just wanted to show you guys. But this is what I'm really about. When I saw video of Scott Ritter talking about the situation with regards to Iran and the United States. Let's watch this.
It means Iran's not allowed to have nuclear weapons. So for all you people out there, the digital mob, who are like, Iran should have a nuke. The nuke's the only way to go. You're in an echo chamber of irrelevancy. Literally, your voice doesn't matter. It doesn't count. Now, you may be able to go out there and generate, 23,000 likes and this, that, and the other thing and look impressive on X. But in the real world, you don't matter because Iran's not allowed to have nuclear weapons. I don't believe in international law. Who cares? The world revolves around international law. Whether we abide by it or break it, it doesn't matter. The big boys, the ones who wear big boy pants and sit around the big boy table and make big boy decisions, they deal with international law.
Okay, so the big boys, right? The big boys who are sitting at the big boy table making big boy decisions, they are the ones who are going to decide what is going to happen. And our opinion doesn't matter. That sounds awfully familiar to me. I mean, I can't help But to think that somewhere I have heard the very same argument being made by somebody else. Who could it be? Let's see. Let's see if we can find anything that is similar to that, right? I doubt, but I'll try.
I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this.
Look at his face. Look at the face of Scott Ritter. And I'm not, like, the smile on my face, I'm not laughing at what Genocide Joe did to Scott Ritter. What he did was wrong and not justifiable. And this is Genocide Joe, who is going to really, support what he does. I'm smiling and laughing rather in a way that shows my disappointment, because Mr. Ritter just became what he hated. Let's face it. The big boys with the big boy pants, with the big boy money, sitting at the big boy table, they are the ones who are going to decide, not us. I mean, despite the fact that I kind of do, because I'm an Iranian voter and I can demand my country to adopt certain policies. But, I mean, setting that aside, he is parroting the very same thing that Joe Biden said to him when he called him the old Scotty boy is saying that we should get in there, but we can't go there. Your opinion doesn't matter. It's above your pay grade. So, didn't you, my question is very simple. Did you or did you not have a case there? And if so, how is it that you think that, right now, currently, people are not entitled to have an opinion about this? Look at your face, man. Look at I'm not going to continue this. I'm done covering this spat between Scott Ritter and basically the entire people, anti-imperialist fractions on X that were treated very poorly and very rudely by Mr. Ritter. But I don't want to end this video on a bad note. Let's end it on a positive note. So, what does this mean? Does this mean that my pessimism, my concern, my worry about the current state of the situation, does this mean that Iran is defenseless against an invasion by Israel or United States? Well, the answer is an unequivocal no. Absolutely not. United States should understand this very simple Iranian phrase. بالاتر از سیاهی رنگی نیست. There is no shade darker than black. And if United States invades Iran, carries out any adventuristic, if that's even a word, adventuristic aggression towards Iran, the party that is going to pay the price is not just United States, but also the very small satellite state that they have inside the region, which they provide $4 billion in aid annually, and they spent 70% of, they paid for the 70% of the expenditure of Israel in the war against, Hamas, Hezbollah, Ansarullah. The country that you have sent so much aid to, that you have subsidized its military-industrial complex, you have given so much resources to. This occupation, the occupation, the entity, the illegal entity, will not see the dawn of the next day if United States attacks Iran. This is actually the reverse of the umbrella strategy of United States. You know how they always say that, well, if you attack South Korea, if anyone attacks South Korea or Japan, they are under it's more so about Japan, not necessarily about South Korea, but they are under our nuclear umbrella, right? We are not going to abandon them. Well, this is the reverse of that. You know, the country that you have a very special affinity for, they will be the ones paying the price. And of course, you will also pay the price. Some people talked about nation-killing strike capability of United States in terms of taking out the Iranian missile tech, taking out the Iranian leadership class. Not necessarily. The head of the IRGC Aerospace Force, General Amir Ali Hajizadeh, talked about how if each week, if they unveil a single missile city, and they use the term city because these missile bases are so big that you can't get around in them on foot, you have to use a car, and it will then take a lot of time for you to commune from one place to another. But if you basically unveil a missile city per week, then it will take 2 years for Iran to show, its missile cities. I think that he says even more than that, but who's counting? So Iran at least has 104, considering that there are 52 weeks in a year. 2 years, it means that they have 104 missile cities that are under the ground. We're not talking about the bases that they have underground, talking about the underground cities. And they also have you have multiple facilities that are carrying out, or basically are the places that the Iranian nuclear program is being moved forward. Considering the amount of target that the United States has to hit, there is virtually impossible to carry out a nation-killing strike on Iran. The enemy will pay the price. Let's not forget that it was always very clear that if United States uses nuke against any other country, that country is going to be facing a lot of problems. Countries like Russia and China have reached the deterrence through MAD. Iran, again, as I mentioned prior to this at the first part of my explanation about the future, Iran reached that kind of deterrence by understanding that Israel is very special to the United States. So that's why Iran is not really concerned about the US threats, because the only thing that is keeping Iran away from becoming become an active member, a very, very active member inside the war against Israel, is the fact that it has some semblance of normalcy. The economy is not functioning well, but still we're alive. We don't have open slave markets like Libya in Iran, and the situation is rather tolerable. The other thing that I think people are not really paying attention to is that this is a war. You have probably heard the phrase, you won the battle, but eventually we are going to win the war. Syria was lost, and I explained as to why it is very important to acknowledge our losses. But the same people don't talk about the fact that now Sudan is liberated, and the army of the country is now in charge of the city of Khartoum, the capital in Sudan. So I think that this is not really acceptable for people to look at things from very, very particular perspective, the good and bad. You have to be fair in your criticism. And God knows that all throughout my video, I've been critical of the approach of the Iranian government, the Iranian military. I didn't really talk about the Iranian military to the extent that I wanted, and mainly due to the fact that I forgot. But there are many things to say about the approach. I'm very critical of them. But it is also not really fair for us to not talk about the gains of the axis of resistance. It is hard to think of them as gains, but I think that in future you will understand what I'm about to say. More specifically, due to the reason that I'm not really going to discuss Syria's future, due to multiple reasons. One is the fact that the Joholani regime is currently carrying out a genocide against the Alawite minority inside Syria. A piece of trivia: they are killing those who are not really carrying out operations or not in the coordination circle of the Iranian government, right? But due to the fact that they are already looking for an excuse in order to carry out the genocide, not everything can be stated on the video. But Syria's situation will not remain in this current circumstance. And in fact, we might see a very different organization, very different kind of institution, this time more noble, more aggressive towards the imperialist, more steadfast in terms of its policies towards Israel. But again, so far I'm going to stay away from Syria, but this kind of changes are happening everywhere. And if you go and see read the articles that are written by the US think tanks, or see the videos of them having like these sessions, discussing the matters with regards to Iran, one thing that they talk about is how Iran has this habit of adopting to a new situation. And I think that it is something that is going to happen, albeit not at the rate that the critics, such as myself, would want it to see. But eventually I think that they will do so. They will find the correct parameters to change, sort of think of it as a dial knob. And they will change it to a rather more acceptable situation. This is far from over, and the future is not really that bleak in terms of a war. And I think that actually war, despite the fact that it must be taken seriously, if you listen to the speeches given to the mass by the Iranian leader, you see him adopting a new rhetoric. I mean, he adopted a new rhetoric for a while, then he changed it again, which makes it look like there has been even further development in everything that we talked about. It just hasn't been made public, but the assessment of the Iranian government, the Iranian establishment has changed. But right after United States President Donald J. Trump threatened Iran with military invasion, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, who used to say neither there is going to be a war, nor we are going to negotiate, rather than using that rhetoric and defining the situation in terms of that equation, he said that if they threaten, we are going to threaten them. If they attack, we are going to attack and respond in return. That showed that the possibility of war was higher. And the assessment of the Iranian establishment with regards to whether or not war is going to break out was higher at that time. The likelihood of that was going to be higher. But now, very recently, in fact, today, which is 31st of March, if I remember correctly, 2025, the Iranian leader in the prayer of Eid al-Fitr, which is the end of Ramadan, he stated that it seems that the United States is not going to do anything from outside. My understanding from that, and this is going to be the bleak part of this sort of epilogue and ending of this video, is that unfortunately it seems that United States and the Europeans are seeking to create unrest inside Iran, this time based on ethnicities of different groups. There have been recent episodes of sort of clashes between the Kurds and Turks inside Iran, with Kurds going out in the city of Urumia saying that the city belongs to us. The Turks in return went on and they chanted things that were not really positive in terms of cohesion of the different ethnicities inside Iran. And then, the Iranian police forces had to get involved, and there were all sorts of things. So what I would say is that either there is not going to be a war, or even if there is going to be a war, I would think that it might come off the activation of snapback mechanism by European Union, European Troika to be more precise, and then there's going to be unrest in Iran, or the unrest might actually come before the activation of snapback mechanism. But this is a rough timeline of what we can expect in future, and only then, considering how well the Iranian government handles the recent sanctions that are imposed on Iran, and by the way, they are very serious, considering the fact that this current government doesn't really believe in the whole approach of shadow fleet and everything like that. But sorry for digressing. But the point is that the war will actually come after all these different things happening. So I think that there is still a lot of time for the Iranians to make up a plan for the future. Nothing is set and done. Everything is possible at this moment. But I would say that, considering the statements of the Iranian leadership, there is not a reason to be concerned too much. It seems that the Iranian government is really confident in its ability to protect the Iranian sovereignty. Thank you for watching this episode. If you liked what you saw, and I don't know why would you, but again, if you liked the video, please like, share, subscribe, do all those sorts of YouTubey things, and maybe introduce the channel to other people whom you think might enjoy the content. Thank you for watching this again, and take care.